Japan. It's just one of the world's most unique and fascinating civilizations, right? I mean, it's a place where ancient myths and traditions seem to live and breathe right alongside cutting-edge, futuristic modernity. So let's explore how this incredible story unfolded. So yeah, how does that happen? How can a single culture produce these legendary samurai warriors and, these serene Shinto shrines, and also give us global giants like Toyota and the pop culture phenomenon that is anime? That's really the central question we're going to tackle in this explainer: how a nation became both a guardian of its past and a leader of the future. All right, so to really get a handle on modern Japan, we've got to go way back, right back to the very beginning. The story kicks off with mythology. We're talking gods and goddesses, and the establishment of the world's oldest continuous hereditary monarchy. Pretty wild, right? From its earliest days, Japan was kind of like a cultural sponge. Think about it. The foundational elements of its society, things like rice farming, metalworking, and even its very first writing system, were all absorbed from its neighbors, China and Korea. And, crucially, this is when Buddhism also arrived on the scene, starting this long, complex relationship with Japan's native Shinto beliefs. But here's the thing: Japan was never just a copycat. During the Heian period, with a capital in what we now call Kyoto, the culture just blossomed. This was Japan's golden age for sure. They took all those foreign influences and refined them into something uniquely, unmistakably Japanese. This is where we get absolute masterpieces of world literature, like The Tale of Genji, which really showcases this new, distinct cultural identity. But while the imperial court in Kyoto was busy focusing on art and poetry, a new power was rising up in the provinces: the warrior class, the samurai. And this shift, well, it would go on to define Japan for the next 700 years. So the emperor was still around, but he was more of a symbolic figurehead. The real power now lay with the shogun, the top military commander. Now, this era was full of incredible drama, including Japan successfully fighting off 2 massive Mongol invasions, and they did it thanks, in part, to these legendary typhoons they called kamikaze, or divine winds. An amazing story. But, that shogun's authority didn't last forever. It eventually crumbled, plunging Japan into its darkest and probably most chaotic period, the Sengoku era, or the Age of Endless War. I mean, for 100 years, powerful warlords, the daimyo, were just constantly fighting each other for control of the country. It was total, absolute disunity. And then, out of this chaos, 3 of the most legendary figures in all of Japanese history emerged. Now, they weren't exactly friends, but through this sequential process of conquest and brilliant strategy, they brought Japan back from the brink. You had Oda Nobunaga, who kicked things off, then his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, kept the ball rolling, and finally Tokugawa Ieyasu finished the job, unifying Japan completely. So, having unified the country, Tokugawa Ieyasu set up a shogunate that would bring over 250 years of peace and stability. A long time, right? But he did it through a really radical and honestly pretty controversial policy. He completely closed Japan off from the rest of the world. Yeah, the policy was called Sokoku, and it basically meant that almost all foreigners were barred from entering Japan, and Japanese people were forbidden from leaving. The whole goal was to stamp out foreign influence, especially Christianity, to maintain this strict social order and, make sure there were no more civil wars. Now, this period really highlights a classic Japanese paradox, because while the country was completely closed off from the world, a vibrant and totally unique popular culture flourished inside its borders. This is the era of dramatic kabuki theater, elegant haiku poetry, and those iconic ukiyo-e woodblock prints. And you can actually see the artistic DNA of these prints in the manga and anime that are famous all over the world today. It's a direct line. So, 2 centuries of peace and isolation. And then, it all came to a sudden, shocking end. In 1853, American warships, the Black Ships as the Japanese called them, steamed right into Tokyo Bay. Their commander, Matthew Perry, delivered a simple ultimatum: open your country for trade or face the consequences. And the Tokugawa shogunate, they were pretty much powerless to resist. The shock of those black ships just shattered the shogunate's authority and triggered a full-blown revolution. And this next chapter, it's arguably one of the most remarkable lightning-fast transformations in all of world history. So this was the massive challenge facing Japan's new leaders. They looked around and saw what was happening to other Asian nations. They were being colonized by Western powers, and they were absolutely determined to avoid the same fate. The only answer was to modernize, and to do it at an almost unbelievable speed. The key to this whole era was its breakneck pace. I mean, check this out. In 1868, power is restored to Emperor Meiji. Just a few years later, Japan establishes a modern education system, builds railroads, creates a Western-style military, and even adopts a constitution. And by 1905, it had defeated a major European power, Russia, in a war. Think about that. In just one lifetime, Japan went from a secluded, feudal society to a modern industrial world power. It's just staggering. But this incredibly rapid rise to power, it had a dark side. The drive to modernize and compete on the world stage led Japan down a new and much more dangerous path, transforming it into an aggressive, expansionist empire in the 20th century. So, after its victories over China and Russia, Japan annexed Korea and began to expand into China and Southeast Asia. This aggressive imperialism eventually culminated in the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, which brought Japan into direct conflict with the Allied powers in World War II. The conflict, as we know, was brutal and absolutely devastating for everyone involved. For Japan, the war came to a catastrophic end in August of 1945 with the atomic bombings of two of its cities. The nation was left in ruins, its empire totally dismantled. But the story doesn't end in devastation, not even close. In fact, what happened next is just as remarkable as the Meiji Restoration itself. From the absolute ashes of defeat, Japan would rise again. It became known as the Japanese economic miracle, and what a miracle it was. In just 45 years, from the end of the war in 1945 all the way to 1990, Japan went from total ruin to the second largest economy in the entire world. This explosive growth was fueled by incredible hard work, relentless innovation, and a laser focus on industry and technology. And the scale of that miracle was visible in households all over the globe. I mean, all of a sudden, the world was filled with Japanese products that became synonymous with quality and cutting-edge tech. Think of the Sony Walkman, that reliable Toyota you see everywhere, or Panasonic Electronics. These weren't just companies, they were symbols of Japan's incredible post-war rebirth. And that brings us right back to where we started. Today's Japan is the product of this entire epic history. It's a nation where ancient shrines still stand in the shadow of skyscrapers, and where a deep, deep respect for tradition coexists with a relentless drive for innovation. So, from mythological beginnings and centuries of total isolation, through brutal civil war, lightning-fast modernization, and a complete rebirth, Japan has shown this incredible capacity to transform itself again and again. The big question now is, for a nation that has truly mastered the balance between its past and its future, what will its next great transformation be?